I want to start with recruiting and the news, which is that Korey Foreman, the number one player in the country in the 2021 class, decided that he was going to reopen his recruitment. We call that a decommitment. He was committed to play at Clemson as the best defensive end in the country. He's also getting the same reviews as a guy like Cam Jordan with that body and that frame at 6'5", 265 pounds, tremendous get off and a great athlete. And that's why he's the number one player in the 247 Sports Composite. So who and why is he either one, flipping his commitment, or two, looking to go to, or three, leaving Clemson? Well, it might be a little premature to say leaving Clemson because, well, it ain't over until he signs. So, unpack this. He is the first number one recruit to reopen his recruitment since Robert Kimdichie in the 2013 class. Ironically, Kimdichie was committed to Clemson when he reopened his recruitment, ends up signing with Ole Miss, and that was a really interesting class. That 2013 class went to Ole Miss. From there, Dabo Swinney's no-trip policy ends up biting him. Now, Clemson is famous for getting early commitments, and then Dabo Swinney makes like Emma Donahue and locks the door to the room, okay? Says you cannot take any more other visits. You cannot take any trips. You are committed to Clemson, so the only place you visit is Clemson. Well, Korey Foreman's from California, and ain't nobody making any visits right now, which makes this a really interesting thing to put your finger on if you're Korey Foreman, which is, why would you want to take visits when nobody can take visits? None of us can go out. Well, I'm going to unpack that. But first, SC defensive line coach Vic Soto has been making moves since getting the job in February 2020. He also is leveraging a friendship that Foreman has with true freshman Gary Bryant and another teammate at USC, Drake Jackson. Also, Jackson's father is Foreman's defensive line coach at Centennial, where he plays high school football. So you can see how SC is getting a head start on everybody and also is very much in the lead. Add to that, they need the win. They had a ridiculously awful recruiting class in 2020, ranked 55th in the country and 10th out of 12th in the Pac-12. Ain't a good look for Clay Helton, who has been on thin ice for the last 2 years and somehow has managed to keep his job. And if you can add Korey Foreman and also some other talent to go with Korey Foreman, you can see how perhaps you want to keep him around. And he might be getting those reinforcements because the number one defensive tackle in the country is best friends with Korey Foreman. His name is Maason Smith. Now, Smith is an LSU lean. He's from Louisiana. And a lot of folks think that that's the place where he would most like to go. Yet and still, he wants to play with Foreman. And he said there's a really good chance that I'm going to play with Korey wherever we decide to go. And he also said one of the reasons that Foreman told him he decommitted was because Maason Smith didn't have an offer from Clemson. It's interesting. Also added that Smith wants to take a trip out to USC for an unofficial when we can all take trips again. So you could be adding the number one player and defensive end and the number one defensive tackle in that USC class based on their friendship and wanting to play together, which I still think is one of the driving forces for why so many kiddos end up where they're going to school. First, you got to get past the parents. Then you got to get your own situation. Then who are you playing with? Who are your friends? Who are the people that you like? I mean, you can look at Oklahoma's 2019 class and see Theo Weiss, Jaden Hazelwood, and Spencer Rattler, along with Austin Stogner, all wanted to play with each other. And you could see why OU was able to finish with the number 6 class in the 2019 247 Sports Composite, right? Add to this, Vic Soto has ties to the Los Angeles area. He played for Bronco Mendenhall at BYU. He coached with Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia. And he played for the Raiders, I should say Mayberry's Raiders, for just a minute before going in, becoming a defensive line coach. And he's not that old. He came out in 2011. Now, moving to the next suitor to be UGA, which was the leader before Foreman decided to commit to Clemson. Dan Lanning, Nick Williams are absolutely coming after him, and I would not be surprised to find out that they get a visit. Then throw in there LSU, who I mentioned with Maason Smith, because Foreman was set to take an official to LSU around National Signing Day. Didn't happen for a number of reasons, but travel being one of those. You would expect that to be one of the places that he chooses to go see. One, because they're moving forward to a 4-3. Two, because Bo Pelini is the new defensive coordinator. And three, because Ed Orgeron is really good at this thing called recruiting, but so is Mario Cristobal, who is also personally recruiting Korey Foreman. Cristobal has done an excellent job of locking down defensive talent, particularly guys that play in the front seven in the last 3 years. He signed the number one defensive end in the country in the 2019 class, and for a long time, the number one player in the class, Kayvon Thibodeau. He added in this 2020 class, Noah Sewell and Justin Flo. I would not rule out him being able to go into California where he's won a lot and go get a guy like Korey Foreman to help put the Ducks back into contention to one, win the Pac-12 championship, and two, have an opportunity to play for a college football playoff national championship. Alabama offered Foreman last May, and it didn't take them long to get a visit. You know how much Nick Saban would love to have another stout defensive lineman in Tuscaloosa to help fortify, one, this 21 class that isn't ranked inside the top 30 just yet, but also to continue with this great momentum that they got over the weekend when they saw a commitment from four-star wide receiver Ajay Hall. Now, where it gets interesting is who's laying in the weeds, like Arizona State, who has been really good about recruiting Centennial and almost got Drake Jackson in the boat and has a relationship with that high school over there. Oh, by the way, Antonio Pierce is one of the better recruiters in college football today. Herm Edwards is great at closing the deal. He's everybody's favorite football dad. But that's the wiggle in there is Jamar Cain at Oklahoma, who's just coming from Arizona State and obviously knows all about Korey Foreman. And report from my man at OU Insider, Brandon Drum, is that, yeah, OU is going to pursue, and it might be one of these things where OU is one of the five at the end when there's the five list come out. Now, we also have to factor in, of course, Ohio State, because they are recruiting at a historically awesome level. And so many people will lose their minds if they end up landing Korey Foreman, because that would mean they have a defensive line class that could be better than the 2018 Clemson NFL draft class by the time it's all said and done. That would be Korey Foreman. That'd be Jack Sawyer, who's the number 2 defensive end in the country and a top 5 247 sports composite player. That'd be Tumise Adeleye. It keeps going on with those guys. They have just been destroying it during this dead period. But since Foreman wants to take visits, I don't see a commitment happening anytime soon, particularly to Ohio State. But I would be shocked if they don't get a visit based entirely on what they did in 2019, the class that they're building in 2021, and how good they have been at locking up the kiddos once they decide to give them a look. Other outlier to keep in mind here is Washington. Washington has been in on Foreman, and they're probably going to throw all of their money into this gamble of trying to secure him because they also could land JT Tuimoloau and Emeka Egbuka if they get Foreman. Emeka is the number 1 wide receiver in the country, and JT is the second, number 2 in the 247 sports composite. He plays defensive tackle. So Jimmy Lake could come away with an outstanding recruiting class if he can get one of these dominoes to fall. But you would be wrong to count Clemson out. As a matter of fact, I go with Anna Hickey, who works over at Clemson Insider, who said maybe this works for Clemson in a way that it doesn't usually. A decommitment early right now probably helps them in the long run because then you're able to start from scratch again. You're able to reassess what's going on, why Foreman wanted to take visits, and make sure that one of those visits is coming back to South Carolina to Clemson so that Dabo can once again try to close the deal on the number 1 player in the country and add to what has been a tremendous 12-year run since taking over the program. Really fascinating to get into this recruiting of the number 1 player in the country. And quite honestly, I love talking about this stuff, and I'm glad that Foreman has put his foot down, as it were, and decided, nah, I'm going to take all of my visits because I say to all of the kids, take all your visits, take all your home visits as well. Now, for Oklahoma, that didn't go so well for Jace McClellan because Nick Saban showed up and got him to Tuscaloosa. But I still think he should have taken that because when are you going to have an opportunity to pick Ed Orgeron's brain or pick Nick Saban's brain or Lincoln Riley's brain or whomever it is you hold in high esteem about football and about life and even about succeeding further down the road? Fascinating stuff.